Number 10. Cyclops. While Cyclops might not be as powerful as some of the others on this list, he pretty much perfectly sums up the idea of a hero who has to hold back his power in order to fight. I mean, that's literally what his costume is for, really. Well, other than that sweet X-Men suit. That is just so we know what team he's fighting alongside. But when it comes to his visor, that is straight up being used to better control and restrain his powers, so that he isn't just optic blasting everyone he looks at or comes up against into next week. Additionally, Cyclops doesn't just use his visor, but also uses his gloves to do this. In his gloves are little buttons that Cyclops can basically push to control the visor, allowing him to open it more or less and change the angle at which it will emit his optic blasts. This is also why Cyclops is known as a master of trigonometry. He needs this knowledge so that he can best utilize his optic blasts, knowing exactly how and when to fire them, and with how much intensity in order to achieve whatever the fight calls for. So whether it's a giant full frontal blast or something a little bit more subtle, Cyclops is always prepared for each and every occasion, as long as he has his trig knowledge intact and his visor and his gloves with him. Since the character first debuted, his powers and their immense strength are something that have also been shown as bothering and plaguing this character, with him even believing that Jean could actually never love him because of his uncontrollable optic blasts. How could she ever love me? I have to wear rose quartz glasses all the time. It's not that big of a deal, psych. Just chill. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Number 9. Starfire. Starfire is a character who is immensely powerful, and honestly, we don't talk about her enough on this channel. It's been a minute since we talked about Corey, but let's get into it. The Teen Titans in general are an immensely powerful team, and now that they're no longer teens and are fully grown adults, being known simply as the Titans, they're even more powerful than they once were. Being in control of superpowers as an adult superhero is really, I think, all about knowing when to hold back. Over time, characters have a tendency to only get more powerful and more experienced with age, and Starfire is no exception. In the comics, even pre-Flashpoint Starfire in a fight against Blackfire acknowledges that she is indeed her sister's equal in terms of her power and prowess, saying that the only reason that she has not beaten her sister is because they have never fought as equals, despite being equal to one another. And her sister responds by saying that due to Starfire's caring nature, Corey often holds back, which is basically her weakness. At least, that's how Blackfire sees it. While Blackfire might see this as a weakness, I'm sure Starfire would actually see it as a strength, as it is also what makes her a hero. Sometimes in order to be a hero, you have to know when to restrain yourself, you know what I mean? Number 8. Gentle. Gentle is such a great mutant hero, one we honestly do not talk enough about. His power is so great that it's believed using it could actually result in him losing his life. As a result, Gentle was given vibranium tattoos, which allow him to better contain and control his powers. His powers grant him augmented strength. Despite his mutant name, Gentle can actually become insanely muscular, increasing in size and mass, and we don't actually know the limits of his powers yet, which is why they're also so dangerous. Using them is also really hard on Nesno's body, which could result in his death. Gentle is a hero who, while also a citizen of Krakoa now, is also known for his Wakandan heritage, being actually part Wakandan and part Russian based on his parents' heritage. Initially, it was believed that using his power also caused him great pain and actually resulted in seizures, but we later learned that this was actually more psychological. The vibranium tattoos were therefore helpful for him in regards to using his powers, but were also helpful in the way that they seemed to help lessen his pain. Gentle was also recently a candidate for the X-Men, and one of the mutants you could vote to have elected to the team. He didn't get chosen, but I honestly hope he does get to join the main team in the future, as he's a really neat and unique hero and character. Number 7. The Flash. The Flash might seem like a weird pick for this list, especially as up to this point we've mostly been focusing on characters who have something physical or mental that forces them to hold back their power set. But with the Flash, it's actually all about how powerful he is. He is, I would say, too powerful, which is the issue, especially in regards to his ability to time travel. While Barry Allen as the Flash has traveled back in time and changed things only to learn afterwards of how this was kind of an awful mistake, upturning the entire universe as a result of the change he'd made to basically save his mother, Wally West has seemingly learned from his predecessor's mistakes. For that reason, Wally actually prefers not to get involved when it comes to time travel. He knows that to do so could possibly break the universe and so has a tendency to be more reserved and much more careful when it comes to racing through the time stream. And even when his friend Hunter Zolomon had begged Wally to use his power to help reverse his paralysis by traveling back in time to prevent it, Wally actually refused. This is what prompted Hunter to become the villain known as Zoom, believing that Wally simply wouldn't help him because he'd just not known enough tragedy in his life, as Hunter had. Zoom believed that in order to make Wally as the Flash a better hero, he would actually have to make him suffer. Number 6. Hellstrom. Hellstrom is actually someone who is similar to another character on this list in regards to his heritage, although the other character I'm comparing him to here is actually not from Marvel, but stay tuned for more on them. Because this point is all about Damon Hellstrom, or Hellstorm, depending on his persona and his mood. Hellstrom is said to be the son of Satan, although it is unknown up to this point if his father is really the true devil or just one of the many demons posing as the devil in the Marvel Universe, including Damon's father, as well as Azazel, who is Nightcrawler's father, and Mephisto, who isn't really known for being a father, but did once have a son named Blackheart. That is a thing that happened, and Blackheart did try to usurp him, so, you know. Hellstrom, as such, has two different personas within him, one that is inherently more good and heroic, and another that is straight up or on the verge of being evil, more influenced by his father's heritage. Sometimes these two personas are kind of given different names as well, Hellstrom or Hellstorm, depending on which persona he is leaning more towards at the time. Sometimes Hellstrom is actually only spelled with one L, and other times he's used these names to sort of like protect his identity, although they are both super similar, so I don't really fully understand how that's supposed to fool anyone. Hellstrom has often struggled with unleashing the full force of his power, and sometimes, in fact I would say often, regrets its ties to hell and the darkness that lies within him. Number 5. Shazam. Shazam, or Captain Marvel as some still refer to him today, is one of the most powerful heroes DC has, and in fact some would argue that when it comes to his fights and contests with Superman, it is he, not Superman, who is often the one who would need to hold back. This is because Shazam's powers come from the gods, and some actually say this is because his powers are kinda magical. The limitless wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, stamina of Atlas, power and omnipotence of Zeus, courage of Achilles, and speed of Mercury. There is really no limit, or there shouldn't be, to what he can do, and it is because of this sheer power and strength that Shazam often needs to hold back when fighting against his enemies as well. You could also add in the fact that it is Billy Batson's kind heart that often encourages him to hold back against his enemies, preferring to not be so brutal with his enemies or his opponents. I mean, especially if they are his friends or people he looks up to, because, you know, even heroes sometimes fight each other, like in a fight against Supes. At one point, Superman even played host to Captain Marvel and actually marveled at his sheer power. So, you know you're probably going to need to hold back when you're like wowing Superman with your power levels. Number 4. Blue Marvel. If you are powerful enough to knock out Hulk and live to tell the tale, even if he possibly is maybe a less stronger version of the Hulk from the Ultimate Universe, then you probably need to rein in your powers almost all the time. Blue Marvel's powers come from him being a scientist and being forever changed by an experiment gone wrong. Adam Brashear was the project lead on an experimental attempt to manipulate and utilize antimatter. When the negative reactor exploded, it transformed Adam into, in essence, what he was trying to create. He became an antimatter reactor, harnessing antimatter, which basically powered his amazing newfound abilities. Number 3. Superman. I mean, Superman is one of the strongest superheroes DC has to offer. He packs a mean punch, and I mean a mean punch. He often holds back, and not just in regards to strength and holding back actual force, but also in terms of his morality. Superman has a very strong moral code. He won't even hit someone in the back if their back is turned to him. That's how passionate he is about fighting fair. He doesn't hit his opponents when they're down, and he doesn't kill, even though he could very easily permanently defeat his opponents by just straight up ending them. This just isn't Superman's style, and honestly, it's what most people love and respect about Superman. To use his power to annihilate his opponents would actually kind of be sinking to their level. In fact, in realities where he has chosen not to hold back, like Injustice, where he brutally murders the Joker in response to him destroying Metropolis, killing his BFF Jimmy Olsen, and manipulating Superman into killing Lois, Clark becomes a straight up villain and a brutal dictator, which is why he chooses to hold back more often than not in the comics, because he is aware of how power can easily easily corrupt people. I mean, to be honest, a lot of his villains are people who allow themselves to become corrupted by great power, whether or not they're aware of that. Number 2. Hulk. To say that the Hulk is the strongest there is really not an overstatement. Not only the strongest, but also just one of the most indestructible heroes out there. After all, Hulk is also now immortal, and kinda has been the whole time. And as a result of this, is a character that you do not want to face in a fight. The good news is that Hulk typically doesn't want to kill people, and so he generally does hold back in fights, unless he's going up against someone, that's just about as indestructible as he is. Like, he might not hold back as much when he's fighting someone like the Thing. There are a few reasons that this happens when it comes to Hulk holding back. One, Hulk has actually exhibited he himself has morals. Not all Hulk personas are like this. I mean, look at his alternate version, Maestro, from the future. This version of the Hulk is more devoid of morals and is therefore willing to use all of his strength and power to devastating degrees. The other reason Hulk is often holding back actually has to do with the other persona that's in there with him at the time, Bruce Banner. It's been alluded to before that Bruce can act at times like the Hulk's conscience, but then again, it's also been suggested that Hulk actually might be Bruce's conscience, so kinda depends on the story you're reading as to who is the more heroic between those two personas. Number 1. Raven. Raven is another character that basically sums up the idea of a person who has to hold back and really has no choice in that matter. I mean, we've seen what happens when Raven fully lets go, and it's deadly. Raven in general has to hold back her power in regards to letting herself be fueled by emotion, which is why she generally remains extremely detached. Which also makes her a great counterbalance to someone like Starfire on the Teen Titans team. While Starfire's issue when it comes to holding back is that she has too much emotion, too much empathy for those around her, Raven often prefers to stay closed off from those emotions, knowing that with them could come great power, but at the risk of easily losing control. This is a huge issue for Raven considering her heritage. Raven is related to the demon Trigon, who is immensely powerful and is a version of Satan in essence in the DC universe. While Trigon is her father, he is also her arch nemesis, which means she has to be careful when it comes to possibly opening herself up to his influence at all, as it can and has in the past turned Raven into an extremely dangerous and powerful supervillain. One that could literally end worlds, so yeah. Number 10. Dr. Fate. So here's the thing with Dr. Fate. Typically the character is not just one character, but two inhabiting one body. This is what the Helm of Fate actually represents, the connection of Dr. Fate to Naboo, the Lord of Order, which is where Kent Nelson originally got his powers and his knowledge from. Of course, Kent Nelson also has power separate from his appearance as Dr. Fate. He is after all a supremely skilled and knowledgeable magic user in his own right, thanks to years of training. However, with Dr. Fate really in essence being kinda two people combined, the Lord of Order Naboo and Naboo's host, in this case we're talking about Kent Nelson, these two do not always agree on how best to deal with an enemy or potentially catastrophic events. Case in point in Justice League Dark when Naboo takes control of Kent's body against his will, only for him to later be freed of Naboo's influence and refuse to basically use the power of the helm, instead choosing to keep Naboo trapped within it, because Kent knows, well, if I try to work with Naboo, I'm probably gonna get possessed again. This guy's kind of being a little evil right now. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that subscribe? I know there are many of you that are not subscribed, so do it. Click the button. Do it. Number 9. Cyborg. In the Doom Patrol series, we literally saw just how powerful Cyborg is when it comes to using him as a pawn and manipulating him into attacking his own father. Mr. Nobody managed to trick Cyborg and ended up showing just how much potential he has when it comes to his ability to do harm. Cyborg actually would make probably a pretty great villain, to be honest, which is creepy. Cyborg in general usually has to be careful when fighting against enemies because he is super strong. In the comics and other media, he has also been portrayed as being in essence a master hacker, and as a result constantly decides to hold back rather than, just use his hacking skills to manipulate the world, which would kind of be, and sometimes that would be a little insidious. In the Snyder Cut, it's even alluded to that Cyborg is actually one of the most powerful powerful people in the Justice League, with him being able to control all the banks and bank accounts of the world if he wanted. That's just part of what we get to see. Here he is shown as pretty much having access to everything technological, but being someone who chooses to use this power reluctantly and responsibly, because he is a hero. Honestly, when it comes to powerhouses in the comics who are capable of doing more, but choose to hold back, knowing that unleashing the full force of their power could be pretty dangerous, Cyborg is actually one of the best examples, even though some might not fully comprehend or accept him as the powerhouse he is. But Vic definitely deserves that. Number 8. Sunspot. Sunspot is one of my favorite heroes when it comes to those who have to hold their power back. I mean, at one point, his power was at risk of killing him, guys. After being shot in the head, he was forced to wear a headband to help regulate his powers, as he lost control of them, somewhat, and left unchecked, they could easily kill him. Sunspot's headband would regulate his powers, thereby protecting Roberto da Costa from being burned up from the inside out by literally holding back and balancing his powers for him. And we see just how necessary this is when Bobby, who at the time was known as Citizen V, decides to throw caution to the wind, removing his regulator headband to prove that he is indeed one of the most powerful mutants to have ever existed, while also obviously fighting to save the world by using his power to keep the world engine running, putting his life on the line. Number 7. Sentry. EJ Graham in the comments for the part 1 of this video was considering suggesting Sentry for a potential part 2. Ultimately though, he decided against suggesting that perhaps Sentry doesn't hold back, and instead often simply gets written out of Marvel Comics because he's too overpowered. I would argue that him both being written out / killed off because he's too powerful, and him having to hold back because he is too powerful, are actually both true. Sentry does every now and then go in guns a-blazing, with him ripping people in half kind of becoming a weird, every so often semi-regular occurrence. However, I will also say that more often than not, we've actually seen Sentry hold back his powers and express restraint, especially when you consider he agreed to wipe his own mind and the minds of everyone else on Earth of his superheroic existence just to protect them from the evil villain, the Void, who is basically Sentry's villainous alter ego he was made to believe that he'd always had after being brainwashed by Mastermind. Number 6. Wonder Woman. We have seen what happens when Wonder Woman stops holding back, and it's not pretty, I'm gonna tell you that. Whether we are talking about emotionally with her giving into a well of despair, or physically with her causing the mass destruction of the entire planet as a result of a fight against Superman. In Tales from the Dark Multiverse, War of the Gods, her giving in emotionally resulted in her being overtaken by Hecate, who she had previously trapped in her subconscious, initially preventing Hecate from possessing her. However, after the destruction of Themyscira and the death of her sisters, her fellow Amazons, and her mother, Diana ends up losing hope, and thereby loses control over herself. In Wonder Woman Dead Earth, we learn of how Wonder Woman giving into her rage and removing her bracelets, which in this story hold back Diana's power, results in the destruction of the planet. Even in the main continuity, it's actually been suggested that Diana is much more powerful than she lets on, and this is likely because without holding back, she could actually cause major damage and destruction to the world around her and people in it. Number 5. Storm. Storm has demonstrated restraint on multiple occasions when facing her enemies, and has proven time and time again how much of a badass she is in the comics. Recently, during the AXE Judgment Day event, Storm was one of the few people to survive Uranos' initial attack on planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars. This went down when Storm was the acting regent of Arakko, the planet and nation's leader. Storm is the only person I believe to have actually sat on both the Great Ring of Arakko and the Quiet Council of Krakoa at the same time, and she made this work for actually a pretty good while. In order to get her seat, she actually had to defeat the previous regent who held the seat of All Around Us, that's the name of the seat that she holds, Nameless, the shapeshifter queen. While Storm bested Nameless, she refused to kill her opponent, preferring to hold back and allow Nameless to live, forcing Nameless to actually curse Storm and choose to take their own life rather than simply admitting defeat. Number 4. Black Bolt. Black Bolt is a character who is so powerful, half the time just the threat of him using his power is enough to stop those who oppose him from basically messing with him. Black Bolt's power first manifested at birth, as his mother and father exposed him to Terrigenesis before he was even born as part of an experiment to see, kind of what that would do. This, along with his immensely powerful genetic makeup, resulted in him being born as one of the most powerful Inhumans ever. Black Bolt would end up being kept in isolation for most of his childhood and early life as a result of the sheer power that he possessed. He literally couldn't even just run around and be a kid. No, too powerful. His powers are related to the speech center of of his brain and his ability to harness electrons. Using both, he possesses an extremely powerful voice, with just a whisper often being enough to harm those who stand against him. As it stands, Black Bolt usually communicates telepathically, although not psionic himself, or more often with his own specific form of sign language. Number 3. Icon. Icon has been shown to be even more powerful than Superman on occasion, with Superman at one point remarking that being hit by Icon was the hardest that he'd ever been hit. The two have fought multiple times against one another in the comics, even way back when Clark had his long hair. Oh, I miss his long, luscious locks. At one point they end up fighting in the 2006 Justice League of America series in issue 28, but here it's all a show. So there's no real victor since they are kind of just pretending to fight here. And we have to expect that Icon was holding back somewhat here. Sure, he wanted to make the fight appear convincing, but he didn't actually intend to hurt Superman, which implies that he wasn't even using his full force here, as he likely wouldn't need to go hard to sell a fight to onlookers. With that reasoning, not only have we literally seen Icon hold back, but it also means that the hero, now from DC's Milestone imprint, might actually have to hold back even more than some of the most powerful heroes from DC's mainline, which is pretty wild to consider. Number 2. Magic. Magic is a hero that often gets left out of lists like this, so I want to thank Michael Sheehan in the comments from our part 1 video for suggesting that I add her to this video. Truly, she is a superhero who constantly has to hold back, lest she threaten the existence of the world and possibly the universe. Magic isn't just a straight up hero, she's complicated. She also has a darker side known as Darkchild that she often has to keep contained. And that's what I love about her complexity. She also has a ton of trauma in her life that she constantly has to confront and deal with. Number 1. Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan has to be one of the ultimate heroes for needing to hold back. Dr. Manhattan is insanely powerful, and perhaps this is why he generally prefers to stay out of the affairs of mortal beings. Well, that and the fact that he likely doesn't much care for, humans. He is a reality warper, and in fact is one of the folks, I would argue, in current lore, the main folk, responsible for the New 52 continuity reset. As such, Dr. Manhattan constantly holds back, despite the fact that he could reset the universe on the daily, destroy it, or completely fix everything. Instead of doing any of this stuff though, he prefers to take more of a watcher role, only getting involved when he really feels it's necessary or has some strong desire to do so, which isn't very often.
Number 10. Sleaze. Sleaze was originally Darkseid's right-hand man as the new god began accumulating more and more power on the planet Apokolips. Eventually, Darkseid grew tired of Sleaze's depravity and banished him to Earth using his Omega beams for the very first time. He was stranded on Earth for hundreds of years, making a home for himself in the sewers underneath a slum in Metropolis. Despite not having done much during his many years on Earth, he is actually extremely powerful, being able to dominate the minds of others. He could use these powers to control the governments of Earth or install himself as a ruler, but he refrains from using his powers to their full potential, deciding to instead use them for relatively small-scale crimes. For example, in his first appearance in Action Comics number 592, he uses his mind control power to kidnap Big Barda, forcing her to star in adult films that he sells to a local producer. When Superman shows up to stop him, he manages to bring Superman under his control as well. What does he do with the opportunity most villains could only dream of? Having the Man of Steel himself as a mind-controlled servant? Does he rob banks? Does he make Superman knock down buildings? No. In the next issue, he just tries to make another video starring Superman and Big Barda. Fortunately, Barda's husband, Mr. Miracle, stops his scheme before things get too spicy, but it's lucky Sleaze lacked either the ambition or the imagination to use a mind-controlled Superman to his full potential. Number 9. Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is of course the arch-enemy of Superman, who is both a genius inventor and a ruthless billionaire who moonlights as one of the most dangerous supervillains in the DC universe. Lex doesn't have superpowers in the traditional sense, but he is so intelligent that it is essentially a superpower that has allowed him to come up with everything from his battlesuit to the cure for cancer. Now, if his only goal was to take over the world, he probably could, but he has to hold back on this to a certain extent, as he is also obsessed with maintaining his public image. If Lex were to own the fact that he's a supervillain and just go ham, he could probably be very effective at it, but all of his plans end up taking a lot longer than they have to because he has to make sure that he can't be linked to them and that his reputation stays intact. On the one hand, this is practical, as he certainly doesn't want to end up in prison if he's stopped, stopped. But on the other hand, if it weren't for his pathological need to be beloved by humanity, he could save himself a lot of effort. On the other hand, if he chose to put his brain towards good, he probably would be one of the most beloved minds on the planet, but his greed and lust for power prevents him from reaching his full potential on that front as well. Number 8. Black Adam. Teth Adam was a member of the Kandaki tribe in ancient Egypt whose people were forced into servitude by a cruel pharaoh of the time. Most of his family was killed, but Teth Adam was able to escape with his nephew Amun when the wizard Shazam brought them to the Rock of Eternity to make Amun his latest champion. Amun learned that he could share his powers with Adam, and the two returned to free their people. Amun wanted to find a peaceful solution, but Adam felt that peace was not an option and wanted revenge. So he killed Amun in order to gain his power for his own. In the present day of the DC universe, he is the ruler of Kondak, and sometimes a member of super teams like the Justice Society. He kind of flip-flops between being an anti-hero and a straight-up villain. His enchantment from the wizard Shazam has granted him the strength of Shu, the speed of Horus, the strength of Amun, the wisdom of Zehudi, the power of Aten, and the courage of Mehen. This gives him super strength, speed, flight, and lightning casting abilities that make him capable of taking down most of the heroes of the DC universe with ease. Despite this, he doesn't usually go in on the whole conquest thing and sticks to his home country. This is due to a deal he made with the Justice Society that says that they won't interfere with his rule if he promises not to expand his borders. It's a good thing he mostly sticks to this, as when he did decide to cut loose and start World War III, he was a menace to stop and was responsible for the death of millions of innocent lives. Number 7. Magneto. When Max Eisenhardt was a young man in Germany, he was subjected to many atrocities at the hands of the Third Reich, who sent him to Auschwitz for no reason other than being Jewish. He eventually escaped and became known as Erich Lenscher. He discovered that he had the ability to control the powers of magnetism, and after the war, used them to track down former German soldiers. He developed the belief that mutants and humanity could not coexist and became Magneto, a mutant dedicated to mutant superiority and the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He is what is known as an Omega-level mutant, being capable of amazing feats such as defeating the Avengers by himself, taking control of the Earth's satellites to hold it hostage, and causing a massive EMP that shut down all technology on Earth. But because his goal is to make the world a better place for mutants, he can't use his full powers, which could destroy the entire planet. In the Ultimate Universe, Magneto reversed Earth's magnetic poles and caused a massive tidal wave that destroyed most of the heroes of the Ultimate Marvel Universe, as well as countless civilians. Let's hope his regular 616 counterpart doesn't feel the need to go down this route anytime soon. Number 6. Brainiac. Brainiac is a complicated villain whose goals change depending on which version of the character you're looking at. Originally, he was an alien whose goal was to kidnap cities so that he could repopulate his home planet, but this was eventually retconned so that he was trying to collect as much knowledge as possible so that he could become the smartest being in the universe. Part of how he achieves this is to go from planet to planet in his skull-shaped ship so that he can steal a city, which he then puts in a bottle for further study before sabotaging that planet's sun so that the planet will be destroyed, making him the sole owner of the information. What I find relevant for this list is that destroying the planet is the easy part for him. What tends to take the most time is getting the city bottled and shrunk. He achieves this with an army of robots and a special shrinking beam, but it does take time, usually enough that Superman is able to stop him. So Brainiac could destroy the planet without getting particularly close and wipe out all of its population, but as he needs a sample to study, he is forced to go through more complicated and elaborate means to accomplish his ultimate goal. Number 5. Orphan Maker. When a mutant named Peter was taken from an orphanage run by Mr. Sinister by a mutant named Nanny, he was fitted with a battle suit that made him impervious to most types of damage. Him and Nanny go about a twisted scheme of saving mutants by taking them from their non-mutant parents, who Peter then takes out, earning himself the nickname Orphan Maker. The battle suit makes him an incredibly powerful foe, but also acts as a power dampener for his as of yet unrevealed powers. However, Nanny has stated that his power is is world-ending, and if unleashed would leave no survivors on the planet. So whatever he's holding back, it must be pretty powerful. I honestly couldn't find much info on his potential powers, but if you know something I don't, please let us know in the comments below. Number 4. Lucifer. Lucifer is of course a fallen angel who rules hell. He ruled hell for over 10 billion years, growing tired of the various stereotypes that mortals had come up with about him, claiming that he stirred evil in their hearts and bought and traded souls, all of which were untrue as he simply punished the souls who ended up in his realm. He eventually chose to leave, banishing all the souls and handing the keys over to Sandman and going to Earth to open a bar. He is still evil, I mean he is the devil, and he has an incredible amount of power, being immortal and nigh omnipotent, and being able to manipulate reality at will. Something interesting about him though is that he chooses to always keep his word and never lie. This isn't some weird rule that he is forced to follow, he just has a specific code of honor that he chooses to stick to. So even though there have been times where he's been tricked by characters like John Constantine and could just not honor any agreements and kill him, Lucifer chooses to keep his promises. Number 3. Galactus. Galactus is an incredibly powerful cosmic being who travels the galaxy, consuming energy-rich planets in order to sustain himself. For thousands of years he did this himself, consuming every planet he came across until eventually he came to the planet Zenla, where he met Norrin Radd. Radd spoke with Galactus and pointed out that traveling the universe searching for planets was using up a lot of the energy that he was getting out of eating the planets. Galactus admitted that this was a less than ideal situation and agreed to spare Norrin's planet if he would become his herald, finding planets on his behalf and then essentially ringing the dinner bell. Norrin became the Silver Surfer and served Galactus for many years. So while Galactus is capable of using his own powers to find the planets, he holds back and lets his heralds do the task for him, as if he cannot find a planet to consume and runs out of energy, he risks death. Number 2. Ares. Ares is the god of war and frequently tangles with Wonder Woman, being the main villain in her first feature film. In current continuity, he's a lot more chill and actually works with Diana a lot of the time, but we're going off of the new Earth continuity for this one. Ares gains his power from conflict on Earth, often stoking the flames of aggression to get people or countries to go to war. The more intense the war, the more powerful he becomes. However, he is in the difficult position of having to keep people in conflict without letting the conflict reach too much of a boiling point. For example, if he helped start a third world war, that would be really good for him, but if that war escalated to the point where the planet wiped itself out, it would be really bad for him, as there wouldn't be enough conflict to sustain his power. This means that he has to hold back so that he can hit that sweet spot of conflict in the world. Number 1. The Beyonder. The Beyonder is an ancient being from a race known as the Beyonders who exist on a plane of existence beyond the limits of our known universe. When he was accidentally taken to Earth by a group of supervillains using a tachyon beam, he became curious about Earth and decided to stay as an observer to learn more about humanity. He became interested in humans' tendency to be constantly searching for meaning, something foreign to him as he thought he was everything in the universe. When he discovered that this was not the case, he developed an existential crisis of his own and decided to search for meaning by starting the Secret Wars, where he transported the heroes and villains to Battleworld to make them fight. Among his many powers is the ability to manipulate reality, and once took over the entire Earth with a mere thought. He can also erase the memories of everyone on Earth so that they forget meeting him. He could potentially end the planet with a thought, but holds back as he is still trying to learn about both himself and humanity. He has since been made less powerful than he was in his initial appearances, but in his original form, he could easily have been the end of the Marvel Universe if that had been conducive to his goals. Number 10. The Spectre. This spirit of vengeance in the DC Universe first appeared in More Fun Comics number 52. He was originally a demon named Aztar who was helping Lucifer to try and take control of heaven. He eventually had a change of heart and surrendered to the Archangel Michael. As a means of atonement, his memory and consciousness were wiped and he was transformed into the Spectre. He is a divinely powered being capable of almost anything he can imagine. He can travel between dimensions and can shoot energy blasts, is immortal and capable of flight, intangibility, possession, telepathy, and telekinesis, just to name a few of his powers. In order to temper this power, he must be bonded to a human host, with his most often host being Jim Corrigan. Spectre has no limit to his power, but is bound by the morality of his host, who often prevents him from unleashing the full wrath of God upon his enemies. Number 9. Green Lantern. The Green Lantern Corps are a group of intergalactic space cops who are led by a group of aliens known as the Guardians of the Universe. They have used the green power of will to create a central power battery on the planet Oa, and to create power rings which recruit members to the Corps and allow them to protect their sectors by creating constructs of anything the wearer can imagine. One of the most powerful and famous Green Lanterns is Hal Jordan, who has created a lot of amazing constructs over the years. When his home, Coast City, was destroyed, Hal showed just how powerful the Green Lantern ring really was by using it to create constructs of the destroyed city and everyone in it for him to interact with when he mourned. However, when he did this, he was breaking the rules established by the Guardians, who forbid the use of the ring for personal gain. The Guardians immediately told him to report to Oa for disciplinary action, but Hal went nuts and went to war with the Green Lanterns. However, it is still a good example of how the power ring is potentially unlimited, but using its full power in an undesignated way can result in the ring being taken away by the Guardians, which I think makes this point apply to all of the various members of the Green Lantern Corps. Number 8. Hyperion. Marcus Milton was sent to Earth 13,034 as a baby from a dying world of Eternals, where he was raised by a human father who taught him the morals of society. When he grew up, he became the superhero known as Hyperion and joined the super team Squadron Supreme. When his universe and another were colliding, Hyperion tried to prevent his universe's destruction, but failed and was left floating in nothingness until AIM scientists on Earth 616 pulled him into their reality and took him prisoner. He was eventually freed by the Avengers, who he then joined. Hyperion is a ripoff of Superman, whose powers come from the sun. As such, he has a very similar power set, being nearly invulnerable, having super strength, speed, stamina, and the ability to fly and shoot atomic energy from his eyes. Like Superman, he has to be extremely cautious due to his amazing strength, as he could easily destroy the planet if he lets loose too much. Unlike Superman, he has cut loose in a violent way before, such as when he plucked Atlantis from the sea and threw it to the ground, thus destroying it, but he felt bad later, so it's okay. Number 7. Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers is the half-human, half-Kree warrior who joined the Air Force before joining NASA. She discovered her powers and became a superhero, operating under various different aliases such as Miss Marvel, Binary, and Warbird, before eventually taking up the mantle of her dead love, Captain Marvel. She is an extremely powerful hero who has been a member of the Avengers, an honorary X-Man, a Starjammer, and the leader of the Alpha Flight space program. Captain Marvel has all the classic powers such as super strength, durability, and flight, but also has a few extra ones, such as the ability to shoot photon beams and the ability to transmute matter in order to reshape it into anything she wants. She is yet another example of a hero so powerful that they have to be sure to restrain themselves in order to not accidentally kill everyone on the planet. Number 6. Rogue. Perhaps the most obvious choice for a spot on this list, and one that it's frankly kind of embarrassing none of us thought to put in any of the previous 3 videos on this subject, is Rogue. Anna Marie has the mutant power to absorb people's energies through touch, which temporarily grants her their abilities, powers, and memories, and causes her victims to be weakened. She once attacked Carol Danvers, and as a result, permanently ended up with her powers of super strength and flight. She started out as a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants before eventually joining the X-Men. Although her powers can be useful in a combat setting, it can really mess with your personal life when you can't touch anyone you care about without hurting them. So, most of the time, Rogue holds back her powers by wearing gloves for the safety of those around her. Number 5. Storm. Aurora Monroe is descended from a long line of African priestesses who all have white hair and the potential to use magic. Her mother was a princess who married an American photojournalist and moved with him to Manhattan, where Storm was born. They moved to Cairo when she was 6 months old, but when she was 5, her parents were killed, leaving her an orphan. She lived as a thief for a while before eventually making her way to Kenya, where her weather-controlling powers made her be worshipped as a goddess. She is connected to Earth's weather patterns, and as a result, result, her emotions can result in unstable weather. If she gets mad, she could start a tornado, for example. Therefore, she has to be careful to keep her powers in check, lest she accidentally cause a natural disaster. Following the death of Wolverine, Storm had Beast take her into space so she could safely vent her emotions, and she still ended up igniting Earth's atmosphere, causing an aurora borealis effect across the entire planet. Number 4. Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze is a motorcycle stuntman who, in an effort to save his surrogate father, Crash Simpson, from dying of cancer, made a deal with the demon Mephisto. Mephisto promised to cure Crash's cancer in exchange for Johnny's service. Unfortunately, Crash perished in a stunt gone wrong almost immediately afterwards, and Johnny became Ghost Rider, becoming bound to the spirit of vengeance, Zarathos. When transformed into the Rider, he has super strength, is essentially immune to damage, and can manipulate hellfire. Perhaps most iconic is his penance stare, which causes its victims to experience every bit of pain that they have ever inflicted on other people, resulting in guilt, pain, and trauma. Ghost Rider is extremely powerful, but Zarathos tends to want to go really all out on his quest for vengeance, and Johnny often has to hold him back to prevent him from going too far. Number 3. Iceman. Bobby Drake is a mutant whose powers were first revealed when he was attacked by a group of school bullies and he was forced to freeze their leader into a block of ice. An angry mob showed up at his home planning to execute Bobby, but he was saved by Cyclops and Professor X, and he was invited to join the X-Men. His powers include the ability to become organic ice. He can also generate ice, snow, and cold temperature using the moisture in the air. This is actually more powerful than you might initially think, allowing Bobby to freeze the Earth in Astonishing X-Men Volume 3, number 64. He is an Omega-level mutant who holds back from using the full extent of his powers as he fears that he could be dangerous. Professor X once said that Iceman has the potential to destroy the planet if he's not careful, and for a time, Bobby was known to wear a special power belt which helped him keep his powers under control. Number 2. The Human Torch. When Johnny Storm was exposed to cosmic rays while on a space exploration mission with his sister Sue, Reed Richards, and Ben Grimm, he was transformed into the Human Torch, and the group became Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four. As the Human Torch, Johnny is capable of controlling ambient heat and transforming into a fiery plasma. He can sculpt and throw flames with his pyrokinesis and is able to fly. Most relevant to this list is his Nova Flame, which happens when the torch reaches his hottest temperature and expels it 900 feet around him at a temperature of 1 million degrees Fahrenheit. This makes him about as hot as a nuclear warhead, and if he did this in a populated area, it could result in several deaths. He has stated that this power has the ability to destroy a small moon. He also has to hold back so that he doesn't burn up the Earth's atmosphere, killing everyone on the planet. Number 1. Supergirl. Kara Zor-El is Superman's cousin. When the planet Krypton was destroyed, Kara's home, Argo City, was spared thanks to the efforts of her father, although due to radiation the city was slowly turning to kryptonite. When the city was deemed past the point of no return, her father pulled a page out of his brother's book and built a rocket, sending Kara to Earth. She became Supergirl and was placed in an orphanage by Superman as part of her cover, although she was eventually adopted by the Danvers family. Supergirl has all of the same powers as Superman, such as flight, super strength, speed, hearing, invulnerability, as well as X-ray and heat vision. As someone with the same powers as Superman, Supergirl has to hold back when she fights villains, or even just interacts with people in general, in order to make sure that she doesn't reduce anyone she comes into contact with into a fine red mist. She is slightly less powerful than her cousin, but there was a period where she became a member of the Red Lantern Corps, giving her both the powers of a Kryptonian and a lantern to try and have to control.
And at number 10 is Red Hood. Now look, technically, things have changed for Red Hood recently as he has finally agreed to take a less lethal approach to crime fighting, which is why he is at the top of this list. But even though he doesn't bring people to the end of the line anymore, he still leaves them on the brink of the afterlife, and it's debatable whether that is actually necessary all of the time. But outside of his recent developments, Red Hood is an incredibly lethal hero, with almost no qualms about taking the lives of the criminals he faces, and that will be a running theme for pretty much all the heroes on this list. Jason Todd began his time as the replacement Robin, but he had nothing new to offer other than being a bit rebellious, so you guys, the fans, got him savagely taken down by the Joker. Good job. It's actually kind of funny though, because when DC brought him back as the Red Hood, everyone absolutely loved him. Now, he's the black sheep of the Bat family, wielding his dual blam blams and constantly going out of his way to subvert the patriarch of that costume family by going far above and beyond the necessary limits. And at number 9 is Rocket. Icon is quite possibly one of the strongest Superman-like characters in DC Comics, and he is, in my opinion, kinda way cooler. But Icon would have never become Icon if it wasn't for Raquel Irvin, a teenage girl who inspired Augustus Freeman IV to use his alien powers to become a hero. And while she had no natural powers of her own, she used an alien-created inertia belt to let her manipulate kinetic energy and to stand by his side as his sidekick, dubbing herself Rocket. As the human sidekick to an incredibly powerful alien superhero, Rocket needs to bring all the power she's got just to keep up. But on the side of being a superhero, Raquel is also an amateur writer, a high school student, and a single teen mom, all while living in the poorest crime-ridden neighborhood in Dakota, Paris Island. She does all that and has the power to punch dudes through brick walls. There was even a time that she absorbed the kinetic energy of falling out of a plane and used it to completely destroy a whole building in one punch. So now you know I wasn't joking about her giving it her all. Number 8, Rocket Raccoon. From one rocket to another rocket. Only this rocket wields absolutely massive out-of-this-world weapons and is a 4-foot tall raccoon with exceptional tactical skill and a pretty creative potty mouth. Rocket the Raccoon has had a fairly messed up past, which I think is a common thread for heroes who don't really hold back. It gives them a bit of a cynical view of the world, most likely. Now, Rocket comes from Half-World in the Keystone Quadrant star system. Here, a group of aliens built a massive insane asylum, which then had its funding cut, so they abandoned the project but left the patients with robot stewards to watch over them. Now, these robot stewards became sentient thanks to a supernova, and so they genetically engineered the animal companions of these patients to do the job that they were supposed to do, providing them with tons of equipment, weapons, and toy parts. Now, this is where Rocket comes from. Eventually, he went off Half-World and became an incredibly adept bounty hunter with Groot, and eventually joined the Guardians of the Galaxy when Peter Quill put them together to face the Phalanx invasion. Being a little tiny raccoon means Rocket has got to compensate, and he does that by being exceedingly good at his job and going completely all out on his enemies. In at number 7, Ghostmaker. In the same vein as Red Hood, Minoka Khan, or Ghostmaker, is another Batman-adjacent hero with absolutely zero issue with using his katanas, or pretty much anything he can find, to usher criminals into the underworld. The difference here is that Ghostmaker is practically on the same level of proficiency as Batman himself. Bruce Wayne and Khan have trained under many of the same mentors and at the same time, being rivals since they were in their teens. Where Batman sees crime fighting as a duty that he needs to perform, Ghostmaker sees it as an art, and this difference has caused them to go head to head on multiple occasions and eventually led them to vowing to just stay the heck out of each other's way. As Ghostmaker sees this as an art, he never holds back because he's constantly trying to one-up both himself and everyone else, and I mean honestly, he's really freaking good at it. He has even gone into Gotham to clean up the messes that Batman couldn't handle, which is a controversial statement to make, but we can talk about that in the comments down below. Also, Ghostmaker is kind of hilarious. If you want to know what I mean, go read the comics where he is put in charge of Batman Incorporated. He's ruthless. And at number 6 is Hawkeye. Hawkeye makes this list for a very good reason. He fights alongside the Avengers, the world's mightiest heroes, and as Jeremy Renner made note of in Avengers Age of Ultron, he is a guy with a bow and an arrow. Hawkeye needs to constantly perform at the peak of his game and keep himself in peak physical condition just to keep up with his allies. And all the heroes want him on their side because they know he does actually deliver on that. But that's alongside the fact that he is constantly dealing with angry exes. Also, Hawkeye was originally and occasionally an assassin. Not holding back is part of his job description, which is why he was tasked by Bruce Banner with completely assassinating the guy while he was the Hulk by flinging an arrow into his eyeball. Sure, he felt incredibly guilty for this, but Hawkeye, an incredibly capable human, was the one who actually took the life of the Hulk. You can't do that and be holding back. And at number 5 is Moon Knight. Before Mark Spector ever became Moon Knight, he was already not entirely a great person. He was shady for sure, as he was part of the CIA, but also put himself in illegal fights and weapon smuggling schemes, and he was even put on trial for taking out the president of a South American country. He worked as a mercenary, and it was one of the few heroic acts that he did, protecting an archaeologist's daughter, that got him mortally wounded and then revived by the ancient Egyptian god Khonshu in exchange for his servitude. Now, as the Fist of Khonshu, Mark would beat down criminals in the middle of the night while also living 3 other lives with separate personalities. Even though Mark is an Avenger, he consistently takes on his hero work by himself and constantly goes all out on the criminals he finds. Now, due to his split personalities, it's a little difficult for anyone, even himself, to say what he's actually capable of. Where one personality would never do something, another would do absolutely anything. And then there's also the influence of Khonshu that has made Mark abandon people to go and fight whatever battle Khonshu needs him for. Like when Moon Knight needed to fight the Hell Lord Mephisto when he wanted to take over the world. This street level hero took on a Hell Lord. You see what I'm saying here? But more than that, Moon Knight has been able to actually beat all the Avengers and has even been infused with the Phoenix Force. There's a reason that he's one of my favorite superheroes. Number 4, Midnighter. For Midnighter, the thing that makes me say he doesn't hold back is his use of his survival implants. These implants let Midnighter completely and flawlessly regenerate from any injury and give him a super enhanced immune system, which has allowed the guy to fight with a broken neck and other broken bones, actual holes in his chest, and while being set completely on fire. Not to mention, he's fought after contracting pretty damaging viruses, including AIDS. He can also do this because one of his other implants allows him to turn his pain receptors completely off, allowing him to fight when the pain of his injuries would stop a normal person. It's also meant that he's been able to be completely awake and alert while he was undergoing major surgery, and that's pretty intense. The last of his implants grants him environmental adaptation, which allows him to survive self-sufficiently and without sustenance for indefinite periods of time in places like the vacuum of space. Now take all that and grant it to a guy who has absolutely no issue turning criminals into a bloody pulp, and you've got a recipe for someone who never holds back. And at number 3 is Superior Spider-Man. Now, while it is totally true that Spider-Man himself is known to hold back his power and pull his punches, because, you know, greater power, yada yada, great responsibility, that thing, this was not the case when his body was taken over by one of his greatest villains, Dr. Octopus. When Doc took over the body of Peter Parker, he unsurprisingly was not only unaware of the amount of strength Peter actually had, but he was also, unsurprisingly, morally ambiguous with his use of that power. What do I mean by that? Well, the Superior Spider-Man is pretty well remembered for a little thing that happened when he fought against Scorpion and completely punched the villain's jaw clean off of his face, ending his life instantly. There was also the time he went up against Jester and Screwball, 2 unpowered villains who commit crimes just for the thrill of it. For these 2 villains, Spider-Ock, or Spock here, used his fist to turn them into unconscious bloody messes. Spock also led an army of henchmen against Kingpin's base of operations and completely leveled it to the ground, completely destroyed the robot body of the Spider Slayer and then mocks him, and he also completely knocked out Wolverine in just 2 hits for touching him. Hilarious. And at number 2 is Wolverine. If Andrew was here right now, he could probably go on a rant about how Wolverine notoriously, consistently chooses the path of most resistance simply to show how tough he is. And yeah, the guy has an adamantium skeleton, one of the strongest healing factors in comic books, and his powers can't exactly get out of control, so he has almost no reason to hold back at all. He is well known for being one of the wildest, most ferocious fighters in the Marvel landscape. No one wants to face this guy, as almost completely guaranteed to end in their loss, if not their certain demise. In the Age of Ultron story, for example, his very first solution to solve the problem of Ultron was to just go back in time and end Hank Pym's life before he could create the insane robot, which actually would result in a much worse timeline. Or there's Old Man Logan, when the villains coordinated an attack against the heroes and Wolverine thought he completely decimated a large group of villains when he actually took out every single one of the X-Men. The villains took advantage of the fact that Wolverine doesn't hold back to make him destroy his own teammates. It's a well-known fact that James Howlett very rarely holds back. And in at number 1 is the Punisher. I don't even really need to explain this one. Punisher is like the black sheep among all the heroes and even the anti-heroes. He very much toes the line of being a complete villain. Sure, his targets are almost always criminals and villains, but sometimes they haven't been at all. Frank Castle took the life of Captain America as an example. He's famously the Marvel Universe, and he did that while having the same handicap that Hawkeye possesses. The fact that he's just a guy with an absolutely insane arsenal that he is not even slightly afraid to use. And if he ain't using his weapons, then he will use whatever else he has, including his own fists. There was even a time that Frank Castle in the 616 continuity used a steamroller to completely crush and flatten Wolverine in an incredibly overly aggressive comic. What am I saying? Almost every comic with Frank Castle in it is overly aggressive. During Civil War, Frank instantly ended the lives of 2 villains who were on his side as soon as he saw them. He doesn't hold back ever.
At number 10 is Peter versus Kingpin in Back in Black. The clash between Kingpin illuminated a different facet of the web-slinger's character, notably during the Civil War arc in Marvel Comics. You see, with Aunt May's life hanging in the balance due to Kingpin's orchestration, Peter found himself pushed beyond his usual moral thresholds. Striking a severe blow to the crime lord within the confines of a prison, Peter chose not to extinguish Kingpin's life. Instead, he dealt a far more nuanced form of retribution. During his relentless beating, Peter publicly stripped the Kingpin of his aura of invincibility and dominance. This action, more than physical harm, wounded the villain's pride and ego. It was an exhibition of psychological warfare, revealing that the most impactful defeat can occur within the realms of perception and identity rather than the purely physical. But don't get me wrong, it really got physical. The message conveyed was profound. By choosing not to end Kingpin's life, Spider-Man opted for a fate some might deem more excruciating. The knowledge of being bested in front of his peers, stripping away his veneer of invulnerability. This act underscored the poignant and strategic intellect behind Spider-Man's mask, elevating the battle beyond the realm of physical conflict due to the psychological. At number 9 is Conquest versus Invincible. The showdown between Invincible and Conquest isn't merely a clash of titans. It's a profound exploration of the moral compass and the repercussions of power unshackled. Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, typically represents the epitome of heroism, symbolizing hope and self-sacrifice. However, his confrontation with Conquest uncovers a darker side, questioning the fine line of valor and ruthlessness. On the other end stands Conquest, a paragon of unbridled might, showcasing power devoid of restraint. This clash isn't just a battle of fists, but an introspective journey into the ethical quandaries that arise when power goes unconstrained. Now, what forced Invincible into this frenzy was the fact that Conquest didn't hold back from basically unaliving his girlfriend Adam Eve by sticking his hand through her stomach. So if there's anything that's gonna make Mark Grayson go off the deep end with unadulterated brutality, it's probably that. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is Thor versus Iron Man. The clash between Thor and Iron Man in Thor number 3 wasn't just a showdown of super strength, but a clash of ideologies too. You see, Thor is typically known for his nobility and restraint, but in this instance, he unleashed his full fury against Tony Stark, who had previously created a grotesque clone in Thor's name. It wasn't just about physical combat, it was a statement. Thor's response to Stark's arrogance was immediate and intense, shrugging off repulsor blasts and delivering a relentless lightning strike. What's striking here, pun intended, is Thor's refusal to hold back, a departure from his usual demeanor. With the colossal thunderbolt, he practically fries Iron Man's armor, asserting his divine might over Stark's technology. Holding Tony helpless, he delivers a decisive message about power and bravery, making it clear that he doesn't bend to orders or intimidation. The clash isn't merely a physical battle, but a demonstration of the disparity between godly might and human innovation. It's a powerful moment where Thor sets the record straight and leaves Iron Man to contemplate his actions on a walk of shame in his battered armor. At number 7 is Billy Bishop versus Payback. In The Boys issue number 32, we delve into a brutal showdown between Billy Butcher and the superhero team Payback. The stakes soar as Butcher, leading the boys, finds himself in a perilous situation against these powerful adversaries in a 5-on-1 tussle. But what ensues is a raw display of Butcher's unwavering resolve and resourcefulness. In the heart of the conflict, Butcher orchestrates his defense in a grim and calculated manner. His cutting tactics include using shards of glass as a weapon against Stormfront, exploiting unconventional tools such as a pickaxe and a shovel to incapacitate his foe. foes. The furiosity of his attacks leaves Payback reeling, demonstrating Butcher's unrelenting and unforgiving approach to achieve his objectives. Through the confrontation, Butcher's tenacity is a stark contrast to the superhuman abilities of his adversaries. It's a testament to his resilience and the unyielding determination in the face of overwhelming odds. The clash here culminates with a cliffhanger, leaving the fate of Soldier Boy hanging, while Butcher, true to his namesake, displays an unapologetically intense and dominating exhibition of power. At number 6 is Hyperion. Hyperion's takedown of Galactus in Heroes Reborn number 2 is a significant departure from the standard superhero playbook. See, Hyperion's backstory is crucial here. He's driven by a deep-seated desire for revenge because Galactus, the cosmic devourer, not only destroyed his home planet, but also wiped out his entire family. So when Galactus comes sniffing around Earth looking for his next cosmic meal, Hyperion just isn't having it. He doesn't waste time or energy seeking a non-lethal solution like Superman might. Instead, he acts on his seething anger and immediate need for justice. This move starkly contrasts the moral and ethical approach we typically see from characters based on the likes of Superman. It's a bold illustration of how personal history and motivations can shape a hero's actions in a supercharged moment. This kind of storytelling adds depth and complexity to these larger-than-life characters, painting them in shades of gray rather than simple black and white. At number 5 is Ultimate Captain America versus Giant Man. Every now and then we get a glimpse of the heroes, the so-called good guys, throwing away the rulebook and going all out. This brings us to a gripping encounter between Ultimate Captain America and Giant Man, a battle that transcends the conventional hero versus villain narrative. The scenario unfolds when Cap, tasked with detaining Hank Pym due to his problematic behavior as a spouse, takes matters into his own hands. Cap doesn't hold back. He initiates the encounter by getting physical with Hank, provoking him to escalate the situation by using his ability to grow to massive proportions. Seemingly leveling the playing field, Hank makes himself massive, thinking it's now a fair fight. However, Cap, being the tactician he is, finds an unexpected advantage in the oversized form of Giant Man, and it's not pretty. With Hank now very vulnerable due to his enlarged size, Cap seizes the opportunity and strikes where it hurts most, delivering a blow to Giant Man's most sensitive area. The skirmish turns brutal. Just when it seems like the conflict is drawing to a close, with Giant Man subdued, the cavalry arrives. But before Cap wraps up, he delivers a final taunting verbal jab, encapsulating the brutal nature of the fight. How big do you feel now? At number 4 is Deadpool versus everybody. In the twisted saga of Deadpool Eliminate the Marvel Universe, Wade Wilson, our favorite merc with the mouth, takes his anti-hero antics to a whole new level. Deadpool, fully conscious of his existence within a comic book, decides to liberate his fellow characters from their fictional suffering by wiping them out of existence. His methods, well, they're a mix of twisted creativity and brutal efficiency. From the Avengers to the formidable Wolverine and even Magneto, Deadpool concocts lethal solutions tailored to each adversary. His arsenal includes ant-sized explosives for the Avengers, a carbonadium blade to counter Wolverine's healing factor, and even an acidic jello cube to take down Magneto. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, the culminating takedown was when Professor X attempts to shut down Deadpool's mind, only to suffer a fatal brain hemorrhage, unable to cope with the reality that they're all mere pieces of fiction. And number 3 is X-23. There we have an intense showdown between X-23 and the notorious Dr. Xander Rice. Picture this, there's an imminent explosion and a choice between personal fulfillment and seeking revenge. X-23 faces a momentous decision as the countdown to the facility's detonation ticks away. Rice, responsible for inflicting unimaginable torment during Laura's creation, gets the tables turned on him. In a visceral display of completely justified rage, X-23 unleashes a brutal takedown with her iconic adamantium claws, choosing to make every remaining second count. It's a showdown fueled by vengeance and a raw personal vendetta. Despite the temptation to seek revenge, X-23 walks away unscathed as the clock strikes 0. This clash wasn't about physical combat, it's a clash of morality and personal resolution. A display of unyielding strength and determination to move forward, leaving Rice in the wreckage of his own creation. At number 2 is Punisher versus Stiltman. Here we've got the Punisher, a vigilante known for his no-holds-bar approach to taking down the bad guys. So in this particular instance, he's facing off against Stiltman, who, well, he's a bit more on the obscure side of villains, known for, you guessed it, his telescopic legs. Now, the Punisher doesn't mess around. In Punisher War Journal number 1, he decides to make a serious statement by aiming and firing a not-so-light anti-tank weapon straight at Stiltman's groin. Yeah, it's a whole new level of brutal. And despite that explosive hit, only the top half of Stiltman survives, while the rest, well, let's just say it's not feeling too great. But wait, it doesn't end there. Things get even wilder. At Stiltman's farewell gathering, the whole scene takes a turn for the worse, as the Punisher, disguised with a fake mustache, sets off explosives hidden around the place, creating chaos and taking down a whole bar full of liquored up villains. It's not your typical hero move, right? This intense, savage, and, well, pretty brutal if you ask me. And it's just scratching the surface of the sheer madness that went down in that clash. At number 1 is Zeus versus the Hulk. The Hulk is known for his incredible strength, but he decides to take on the Greek pantheon, specifically challenging Zeus. But here's the thing, Zeus is on a whole other level. He's not just a god, he's a heavyweight, and he wastes no time in showing Hulk who's boss. In a thunderous bolt, Zeus smashes the Hulk, shattering his ribcage. The Hulk, resilient as he is no match for Zeus's power. But here's the kicker. Zeus could easily end the Hulk with a snap, yet he chooses not to. Why? Well, I mean, he's got his reasons, declaring that he'll fulfill the Hulk's request to be taken down by a hand for his blasphemy. It's a clash of ideologies as Zeus rejects Hulk's sacrifice plan, stating it as the wrong religion. Zeus leaves Hulk severely injured, sending him flying, teaching him a lesson that'll linger for days. The clash isn't about physical strength, but about conflicting the beliefs and the repercussions of the divine. And the repercussions of challenging the divine.
Number 10, Spider-Man versus Firelord. I think it's a well-known fact that Spider-Man pulls his punches. It's part of the reason he is one of the best heroes, because he does everything he does while also holding back. But I always forget how much he actually pulls those punches. For example, in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 270, a black-suited Spider-Man puts one hell of a beating on a former Herald of Galactus, Firelord. Previously, Firelord had been wandering the cosmos when he stopped into New York to enjoy the culture, only to be attacked by firemen, and then kicked in the face by Spider-Man. Now, the Lord of Fire wants his revenge. After leading Firelord on a merry chase through office buildings, Grand Central Station, the subway system, into a construction zone, having a building demolished on top of them, and then leading him to a gas station which then explodes, Spider-Man, at his wit's end, musters all his effort and his spider sense to lay an incredible beatdown of speed, agility, and raw strength on Firelord, getting lost in his bloodlust until Captain America and the Avengers show up to be like, dude, you got him! Chill. Number 9, Firestorm v Parasite. Rudolph Jones found himself exposed to a strange form of radiation which changed him into the bald, green-skinned parasite with the ability to absorb the life energy of others. In Firestorm, the Nuclear Man, issue number 86, Parasite is released from an area he is being held in and goes on a rampage, draining multiple people of their life energy, including Firehawk, who fell pretty easily to this villain. Luckily, the hero Firestorm is nearby. Now at this point in time, Firestorm has become the world's fire elemental, and received a pretty significant power boost. Almost as if to prove that fact, Firestorm comes in hot on Parasite with a blast of flame, and then when Parasite tries to drain Firestorm's power, the hero is unaffected as he says, "My powers come not from myself, but from the earth. I don't have power, I am power." And in a last-ditch effort, Parasite decides to try and trade Energy Blast with Firestorm. Unfortunately for Parasite, it is nowhere near an equal fight. He uses up all the energy he took from Firestorm, and then just trying to hold back Firestorm's blast, Parasite goes through his own reserved life energy until he is on the brink. Realizing he will lose, he begs Firestorm to stop, saying that Firestorm would bring the end for Parasite, to which Firestorm simply says, "That was my intention." Luckily for him, Parasite was saved by the allies of Firestorm, who told him to just stop, but this hero left Parasite emaciated from using up his own energy. Number 8, Batman vs. Thugs. Have you ever played the Batman Arkham games? The combat in those games is absolutely fantastic, but it still leaves me wondering how many of these random street thugs actually survive after their interaction with Batman. He hits hard, and he is pretty unforgiving about it, which serves his whole point of instilling fear. But I think because these nameless thugs are cannon fodder, they essentially get the worst beatings of most of Batman's villains, and we never hear from most of them again. That kind of tells you all you need to know. Now, as an example, let's talk about a group of thugs in the All-Star Batman and Robin series, issue 7. Now, this comic is written by Frank Miller, who seems to be able to get away with making Batman do pretty much anything. Like in the opening pages of the issue, Batman comes speeding into a group of armed thugs, foot first, maniacally laughing like the Joker, talking in his head about how Gotham is full of cockroaches. He relishes the fact that criminals are scared that they are disposing of each other accidentally. Then he sets fire to a bottle of bleach and tosses it onto the criminals, blanketing them in fire. And then he continues beating the snot out of them while they're on fire. And then what happens next? I don't really know how to explain this, but Black Canary pops up out of nowhere and these two superheroes just start making out and getting busy while the thugs are barbecuing in the background. Unfortunately, yes, this is Batman, and it's scary. Number 7, Zombie Peter Parker. In Marvel Zombies number 2, Zombie Peter Parker and Luke Cage leave the group of cosmically superpowered zombies and, regaining their good guy nature, try to protect what's left of humanity on Earth. But they unfortunately get teleported to a different reality by Malcolm Cortez's son. In Marvel Zombies Returns, the zombie heroes end up on Earth 91126. Zombie Spider-Man thinks he can cure their zombie virus by finding the Lifeline tablet, but just as he is getting underway with the plan, he gets distracted and forced into a fight with Dr. Octopus, Electro, Mysterio, Vulture, Kraven, and Sandman, aka the Sinister Six. Despite trying his best to hold back his hunger, Spider-Man cannot resist Kraven's smell and ends up attacking him, biting into his neck. Mysterio tries using illusions, but Spider-Man's senses help him locate and dispose of Mysterio. Electro and Dr. Octopus try to attack Spider-Man together, but this just puts them in positions to hurt each other instead, with Electro using up most of his power, and Dr. Octopus left electrically deep fried for Spider-Man to eat. As they realize this is not going too well, the remaining villains try to hightail it out of there, but before Vulture can escape, Spider-Man rips off his wings and uses them to finish off Electro before he can shoot more electricity at him. Only Sandman manages to escape from the chaos, going to attack this universe's Spider-Man for this utterly sickening display of violence. Number 6, Wally West v. Inertia. Inertia was a young villainous Thaddeus Thawne. Inertia is to Bart Allen, aka Impulse, what Eobard Thawne is to Barry Allen. He is his reverse. Now, Inertia had been raised his whole life to absolutely despise speedsters of any kind. He learned to be a villain from others, but his actions were all his own. So, when Inertia made the mistake of taking the life of his opposite, Bart Allen, he would be made to suffer the consequences. Unfortunately for him, those consequences came in the form of Wally West, one of the most powerful speedsters ever. After taunting Wally about the fact that he just took the life of his sidekick, in All Flash number 1, Wally takes the young villain who had the potential to be reformed and removes his ability to move at all. He traps Inertia in a museum as one of the exhibits, only able to blink once every 100 years. And he leaves the kid there still thinking in real time during all of this, meaning he's driven slowly and very assuredly insane. And just as the cherry on top, Wally left him facing the exhibit of Bart Allen, the man that Inertia could have been. It's an incredibly dark fate for a hero to impose on a villain, especially one who's like a sidekick. Number 5, Midnighter versus Commander. The Authority is a really cool group from DC Comics' Wildstorm universe. The two most well-known heroes from the team would be Apollo and Midnighter, who are basically like Superman and Batman respectively, only these two are husband and husband, and Midnighter is almost insane. He is like Batman, but like Batman who is also mixed with the Punisher and maybe a little bit of like Deadpool, I think? And these stories get dark. In Mark Millar's run on the Authority, a villain by the name of Commander makes the very big mistake of attacking and forcing himself on Apollo. This was a hell of a mistake. In response to those actions, Apollo, after recovering, burns Commander's legs so that he cannot escape, and Midnighter shows up with a jackhammer, and the rest is something we are kept from seeing, thankfully. If you want to check it out for yourself, you may be my guest, but you've been warned, it's quite haunting. Number 4, Black Panther and the Skrulls. Wakanda, like the other fictional kingdoms of Atlantis and Latveria, is protected by a man who will do pretty much anything to protect his people. T'Challa doesn't really have the luxury of sparing those that would do harm to his incredibly advanced home. But Wakanda is also one of the #1 places targeted when an invading force wants to take over Earth. So, taking those two facts into account, when the Skrulls tried to invade Wakanda to start their mission of dominating the world, T'Challa, the king of one of the most advanced nations in said world, and his wife, Storm of the X-Men, one of the most powerful mutants alive, left those aliens with a clear message. After tricking the Skrulls into attacking their own men for information, the Skrulls send out their best warriors for the task task of taking down the pair. But just as those toughest warriors are gone from sight, an army of Wakandan soldiers breaks into the Skrull ship and leaves not a single Skrull soul alive. While that's happening, those toughest warriors are turned into pulp by Black Panther, with T'Challa using their bodily fluids to write "This is what happens when you invade Wakanda" on the bridge of the Skrull ship. Damn. Number 3. One rule. Batman Hush could in its entirety be seen as a brutal moment. It strikes at the childhood life of Bruce Wayne himself, pushing Batman to a point we rarely ever see. In Batman issue number 614, right smack dab in the middle of the Hush story arc, Tommy Elliot, the childhood friend of Bruce Wayne, loses his life at what seems to be the hands of the Joker. All the years and years of distress caused by the Joker, the people he hurt, the lives lost, they all fuel this rage inside of Bruce Wayne, who begins to lay a spectacular beatdown on the Joker, knocking out both Harley Quinn and even Catwoman, who both try to stop him. Batman almost goes to the point of permanently bringing an end to the Joker, beginning to put aside his morals to finally be rid of this homicidal plague on Gotham City. It's not until Jim Gordon intervenes while Batman has his gloves around the Joker's neck that the Dark Knight finally relents. The worst part about this, though, is that if Batman did go through with it, the Joker wasn't even the one responsible for the crime in the first place. Number 2, Captain America. We love Civil War. Not the actual Civil War, the Marvel one. So many great examples of superheroes fighting other superheroes. But the main star of the show in this conflict is Iron Man versus Captain America. And while the climactic fight ultimately ended in a Captain America favored draw, I'd say the first major fight was definitely more of a win for Tony Stark. In issue number 3 and 4 of the main Civil War comic, a battle takes place between the forces of both Cap and Stark. While Steve is fighting Spider-Man, Iron Man comes swooping in, attacking with an armor that's analyzed every punch Cap has ever thrown, and he just starts going to town on this guy, feeding him the left right until Cap is absolutely battered. Cap still doesn't go down, so Tony uses a high frequency that shuts down the human brain. He's about to end the fight when Hercules jumps in, attacking with an oil tanker truck, which definitely would do some damage. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Sentry ripping Ares in half. The Sentry is a character that deserves more spotlight. Problem is, he's kind of one of the most powerful superheroes Marvel has. Obviously, that's debatable, but this guy has the power to destroy pretty much anybody in the Marvel universe. He has reassembled his own molecules and taken out the Molecule Man, for example. He's almost too powerful to include in a lot of stories, but it's the fight between the Sentry and Ares, the literal god of war, in issue 2 of Marvel's Siege event that really left people slack-jawed and looking for emotional support. Ares in this story started on the Dark Avengers before redeeming himself and joining the good guys. He had been showing how awesome he is, and he turns his sights on Norman Osborn, which unfortunately means that Ares now has to face his friend, the Sentry. Sentry punches Ares halfway across Asgard, and maybe 2 or 3 punches later, he grabs both ends of the God of War and rips him completely in half. Not only did it leave everyone on the page frozen, it also left readers completely stunned.
Number 10, Daredevil. When Matt Murdock was a child, he was hit by a truck that was carrying toxic radioactive isotopes. He got some gunk in his eyes, and as a result, he was blinded. But this being Marvel Comics, the radiation heightened his other senses to the point that he was given his trademark radar sense, which allows him to do sick flips and fight crime as Daredevil. Daredevil is quite a religious fellow who also believes in letting the legal system do its work as much as possible, so he has a pretty strict stance against killing people, believing that the criminals he fights should be taken to prison and left alive. This has put him at odds with other more lethal characters like the Punisher, who thinks that the only good criminal is a dead criminal. But despite the fact that he is often tempted, Daredevil holds back, using his ninja skills to brutalize and maim, but not to kill. This self-imposed rule has been broken a couple times, such as when he was possessed by a demon, when he was forced to shoot a helicopter pilot who was using a minigun to brutalize Hell's Kitchen, and when he attempted to shoot the Punisher, when Frank had tied him up and taped a gun to his hand. But once again, these are pretty extreme situations where he didn't really have any other options. Number 9, Professor X. Charles Xavier is the leader of the X-Men and the founder of a school for gifted youngsters where he trains young mutants to control their powers so that they don't accidentally destroy buildings on the regular. He is an extremely powerful mutant, being able to read and control people's minds. In theory, he could force anyone to do pretty much anything he wants. Thankfully, Xavier shows a decent amount of restraint with his powers, and usually makes a point of not reading his students' minds without permission, and rarely using them to make people act against their nature. For example, considering that governments in the Marvel Universe are consistently passing anti-mutant legislation, it would be very tempting to control the responsible politicians' minds to force them not to vote for such measures. But he doesn't do stuff like that. Sure, he has a bit of a god complex, and has a history of wiping people's minds when he screws up, or dampening Jean Grey's powers until he feels she's ready for them. But overall, he shows a lot of restraint. Outside the comics, in the X-Men 2 movie, we even see that while using Cerebro, Professor X could kill every mutant or human in existence simply by concentrating. So, yeah, he's holding back. Number 8, Batman. Batman is similar to Daredevil in the regard that he is one of the most gifted martial artists in the world and has extensive knowledge on how to handle any situation. Like Daredevil, he also has a strict moral code that prevents him from killing any of the criminals he faces, despite the fact that he certainly could with ease. For example, in Book 1 of The Dark Knight Returns, Batman is fighting against a group of thugs, and in his inner monologue, we can see him playing out strategies, saying, "There are 7 working defenses from this position. 3 of them disarm with minimal contact. 3 of them kill, and the other hurts." He, of course, chooses the option that hurts. But it is a good example of how, as a master strategist, in any situation, he is aware of how he could kill, but chooses not to. This is due to him not wanting to go down the path of his villains, and having a desire to see criminals reform, often hiring criminals who are let out of prison to work at Wayne Enterprises. So, like Daredevil, he has a strict moral code, but he is better than Daredevil at sticking to it, earning him the higher slot. Number 7, Thor. Thor is literally the god of thunder. He can bring down lightning, he can smash stuff with his hammer, and he is an amazing warrior with centuries of combat experience. In fact, he was so powerful and arrogant that his father, Odin, sent him to Earth in order to temper his power with humility. For those only familiar with movie Thor, in the comics, Odin sent Thor to Earth with no memories of his life as a god, and made him believe that he was a doctor with a bum leg named Donald Blake. As detailed in the character's first appearance in Journey into Mystery number 83, he spent a decade on Earth learning the value of hard work and perseverance as he dealt with his injured leg and set up his own medical practice. After this decade had passed, Odin implanted a message in Thor's subconscious telling him to go to Norway, where he found his hammer and regained his godly identity. I don't know if this is full on holding his power back, but the fact that he went through all of that to learn humility and what it meant to be worthy of his powers shows that Thor is very aware of his powers and the proper way to use them. Number 6, Quake. Daisy Johnson is the daughter of the villain Mr. Hyde and a woman with the Inhuman gene. This resulted in her developing the ability to manipulate vibrations. She can use these for a variety of purposes, like causing earthquakes, hence the name Quake. She can also use these powers on a more micro level, such as when she took on the Omega-level mutant Magneto and managed to vibrate his brain until he fell unconscious in New Avengers number 20. On another occasion, when Wolverine was having one of his famous temper tantrums and attacked Nick Fury, she was able to use her vibration powers to cause his heart to explode. So she has the power to take on some of the most notoriously dangerous characters in the Marvel Universe. In fact, she is so powerful that she actually needs to be really careful about how she uses her powers. Obviously, earthquakes can cause a huge amount of collateral damage, so she needs to be careful of that. But the best example of these powers left unchecked is from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show, where Glenn Talbot gets Quake's powers in an alternate timeline and uses them to destroy the planet. So yeah, she needs to be careful. Number 5, Gambit. Remy LeBeau is a powerful and popular member of the X-Men with the ability to tap into an item's potential kinetic energy, making it a dangerous and explosive weapon. He most often uses smaller items like a deck of playing cards, which he will then throw at his enemies. The only real limit on these powers is that he needs to make direct skin contact with whatever item he's charging, hence the cool fingerless gloves. Oh, and also the amount of time it takes him to charge the object, with larger objects taking longer. He also has the ability to hypnotically charm people, making them more likely to do what he wants. Before he was a member of the X-Men, he was a master thief, but found that he was having trouble controlling his powers, causing him to seek out the help of Mr. Sinister, who gave Gambit a surgery removing part of his brain in order to dampen his powers and make them more manageable. So, while there may be other heroes on this list who are more powerful, none of them took such extreme measures to hold themselves back for the safety of others. Number 4, Northstar.
Oh, Andrew, you talk about Alpha Flight on almost every list. Why don't you talk about more popular teams?
Well, I'll tell you, it's because they're awesome. And because I spent a lot of money collecting every appearance of Alpha Flight over the pandemic, including the issue in Volume 2 that features the first appearance of Big Hero 6, which was a real pain in the butt to find. And talking about them in a work video makes that a tax write-off. Plus, it's my list, and you're literally in my home right now, so I'm gonna talk about who I want to talk about. Jean-Paul Beaubier is the fastest mutant in the Marvel Universe, since Quicksilver isn't a mutant anymore. Northstar is capable of reaching incredible speeds when running or flying. He has a twin sister named Aurora, who is also fast and able to fly, but though she has a greater endurance than her brother, he is the faster of the two. In X Factor Volume 4, Number 7, Northstar and fellow speedster Tommy Shepard are comparing top speeds, and JP reveals that his top speed is 189,299 miles per second, which makes him faster than the speed of light. But he has a very good reason for not reaching his full speed. As he explains to Tommy, that would destroy everything in my path. I could garrote the world in half with one lap if I wished it. It would destroy me physically, not emotionally. I can't breathe at that point because I've created a vacuum and my organs are getting crushed, my bones pulverized into dust. So yeah, Northstar is holding back for good reason. Number 3, Captain Atom. Captain Atom was originally a Charlton Comics character, the same way that Shazam used to be. DC Comics eventually purchased Charlton's collection of heroes, and as a result, he was introduced into the DC universe. In the DC retelling of his origin, Nathaniel Atom was a man sentenced to death for treason. He was offered the opportunity to instead sign up for an experiment designed to test the structural integrity of an alien metal. To test this, they placed Atom in a metal egg and then blasted it with a nuclear explosion. He was vaporized, but much like the Watchmen character he inspired, Dr. Manhattan, he was reconstituted with the metal now covering his skin. Captain Atom can tap into the quantum field and convert the energy into powerful blasts. He can also generate and manipulate matter, such as when he transformed Green Arrow's arrows into butterflies. Captain Atom has to be very careful with his powers, as he is essentially a walking nuke. When he uses his upper power levels, he will start to leak radiation, and if his metal skin is ruptured, he risks detonating like an atomic bomb and destroying whatever city he's in. Number 2, Scarlet Witch. So, Scarlet Witch is one of the most crazy powerful people in the Marvel Universe. One time, she was able to rewrite reality so that mutants were the dominant species on the planet and humans the minority. When Magneto ticked her off, she decided to rewrite reality again, taking away something like 99% of the world's mutant powers by simply saying, no more mutants. She could do that again anytime she wants. I really don't think I need to say anything else on the subject. Number 1, Spider-Man. When I was checking out the previous 2 videos that Amanda did on this subject, which you should of course check out because they're great and also not filmed in an apartment, but I was shocked to learn that Spider-Man didn't make the cut on either installment. So even though he may not be holding back as much as some of the others on this list, I decided to give him the top spot here. Spider-Man is a powerful hero, being able to climb walls, swing from webs, and use his spider sense to avoid danger.
But what we're talking about here is his super strength. He can lift several tons at once, as he infamously did in Amazing Spider-Man number 33, when Dr. Octopus trapped him under loads of heavy machinery. But when you have that level of strength, and also have a rule against killing, you have to make sure you pull your punches to avoid taking someone's head off. This was discovered by Doc Ock when he took over Spider-Man's body and became the superior Spider-Man. In one of his first adventures as the new Spidey, Ock fought the Scorpion, and when he punched the Scorpion in the jaw flew clean off. As Doc put it, never knew this body held so much power. All these years, Parker must have been holding back. That really must have made him rethink every time Spider-Man punched him and how that could have turned out.